Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the garden question and answer video that I do on Sundays. You can ask gardening questions down in the comment section below this video, and that's where we pick from each week. I think we have 25 or 26 written down. I think there were another 11 or so that got written down just in case we end up with enough possibly to do an extra question and answer video at some point in the next few weeks. So thank you for your participation. There's just, again, there's more questions that lots and lots of questions coming in. It's that time of year. You know, as we're coming out of winter, things are waking, although it's going to get cold here again in the next few days. But as we're kind of coming out of winter, you would expect the questions to pick up. I don't know if I guess you can see Holly down here. She's out here with me, my 16-year-old husky mutt, who has been in, of the near 2,000 videos, I don't know how many videos have been on this channel, 1,600 or 8, whatever it is. She's probably been in half of them, or almost half of them. And she is slowing down rapidly, but she still loves to be out here with me while I'm talking to this camera and talking to you guys. So t-shirts on our website are 10% off for the month of February. The code is on the screen here, and there's like 7 different designs. On that same page in the store on HortTube.com is where the tickets for the open garden, which will be Friday evening, Saturday morning, or Saturday afternoon on June 20th and 21st. And again, expansion of the garden going on over there. It would be quite a bit different this year. Gonna be lots of plants moved around. We picked up about 10 new pieces today down at Superior Plants, some of them for the native garden, some of them for this garden. And so there's gonna be lots of changes here. If you were here last year, it's gonna be very different for this year. If you're interested in tickets for that. And I think over a third of the tickets are gone now. So, you know, I know it's still 5 months from now. It's hard to think out 5 months, but a lot of the tickets are gone at this point. So thank you guys who have purchased the tickets. Let's see, I'm gonna list down below this video in the little comment section, or not in the comment section, but the description of the video, I'm going to put a list of restaurants and hotels and other things if you're coming to the open garden, so you have that. And I'll put it in a few more of these question and answer videos over the next few months for you to book a hotel if you're coming from out of town or whatever, or find a restaurant or something like that. What else? Lois from Aiken, South Carolina. We got some mystery seeds in a packet so thank you from Aiken, South Carolina for sending us some seeds, some Lysianthus seeds and some Coreopsis seed. We'll be talking about with this new native garden going in over here, we're going to be talking about some keystone species. Coreopsis happens to be one of those plants that host a lot of different native pollinators and or birds and other things. So we'll be talking about that, but thank you for those seeds. Okay, and we have a seeding video coming up here in the next few days. And again, lots and lots of content. We're gonna be visiting, I think we're visiting 5, 6, 7, 8 nurseries in a week and a half coming up as well. So lots of content coming from that as well. Okay, let's jump into some questions. Somebody asked me my opinion on the Ramial mulch versus wood chips. They're in Northern California mountains in zone 8B, and this is available to them. So that Ramial wood chips or mulch, and this is available in other areas in the country too, is like rather than chipping the entire tree, you can see the wood chip paths behind me, the lighter color material, where this material has all of the wood from the oldest part of the tree, you know, just chunky wood like that, all the way down, you know, up to the limbs and the outer parts of the tree. This material is just specifically the more juvenile growth of the plant. So the top part of the plant and the stems and twigs and the more leafy parts of it. So it's probably going to be slightly more nutrient dense overall, because it's where all the growth in the plant is where that mulch is coming from. So would there be some sort, this person was just asking in general, my opinion on it. Well, it's the same as wood chips really, except for it probably is slightly more nutrient dense overall, because it's in that it's only the juvenile growth of the plants and not the actual timber. So I guess that would come from if you dropped a pine tree and then you ended up using the pine tree for or whatever kind of tree. For the lumber industry, what would you do with the rest of the, you can strip the bark off of it and the bark can go to mulches and things like that. And then you can take the juvenile stems and twigs and the top growth out of it and turn that into this type of mulch. So it would be more nutrient dense overall, but same basic impact in your garden. You're just feeding organic material to the plants. But I'm sure a good material and a good use of the byproduct of the lumber industry, and in all likelihood of using all parts of that tree, so it gets reprocessed back into our gardens or into our houses, or is stored carbon, somewhere. I'm a big proponent of using trees. We have, if you drive through, the southeast United States, you see how many trees are such an abundant material for us to utilize, and we can take them, use them to our advantage in so many different ways, and building structures and all kinds of things, and then we can just replant them and they come back for us. And this is kind of a beautiful relationship we have with trees, as long as we're managing the forest well, obviously, not clear cutting and those kinds of things. But a good use of that material to not throw it away or burn it or whatever. Okay, there you go. Enough of that. Somebody's Dragon Prince Cryptomeria they noticed mine is rust colored. So back over here by the shed, it's a slight rust coloring. Cryptomeria can get a rust color on them, especially like in zone 6, more so than here. Here we get a bit of amber color on them, but that's about it. And it takes a lot of nights pretty cold to get that amber color on them. Most winters they stay pretty green here. Most Cryptomeria or Japanese cedars. Theirs said rust colored similar to mine, but then it said theirs is brittle and dry in Austin, Texas. I don't think brittle is good. So the amber color of mine, it's still pliable. You can tell it's still alive. It just lost that green coloration in it. But if it's brittle, that seems like it's dead, potentially dead. I would leave it in place and wait a few weeks. Maybe it's alive a little further down in the plant. But that doesn't sound, mine is not brown and brittle. It's just amber and, in its winter color. A lot of conifers take on that kind of winter color. So this person loves using plant tone in their garden, but their beagle won't leave it alone in their backyard garden space. Is there another organic source? Somebody had mentioned something, I should have written it down, that's not as smelly that they use in an answer to your question. But what I do, Griffin is crazy about it too, and Holly will get out here and smell it as well. But I like to time my fertilizer application with a rain. And so I have this organic fertilizer, plant tone, holly tone, whatever you're using. It doesn't actually work. It's not actually pushing your plants until the soil temperature warms up and all the soil microbes get going. So I've got a window between here and mid-February all the way to mid-April that I could apply this material. So you don't have to apply it because it's March 1st. You can wait until you're about to get a pretty decent rain, and then sling it out before that. And that way a lot of it can get washed down into the ground before your dog is out there. Of course, on the recommendations, they want you to push it down into the ground. I don't want to do any of that. I do not want to break the soil barrier out here and start getting so many weeds in place of me trying to push the fertilizer down in the ground. So I want to sling it out over the top and then have a rain knock it down, or alternatively, you could turn on your irrigation. Water it in some way or another, and just try to get that stuff melted down in the ground. And it pretty quickly, the smell and a lot of hopefully the dog's behavior, will be better if that happens. So, but just instead of timing it to an exact day like March 1st, time it to a rain that happens between like the 3rd week of February and April 1st or something like that. And that may help you with that problem of it just not laying there for a week waiting for it to rain, and wash it down in there. So somebody asked about Centipede grass fertilizer. So one of the nice things about Centipede is I think it's an Asian species of turf grass. I think it's an Asian species. Could be wrong, but it doesn't take a lot of fertilizer. And in fact, it can be harmed by fertilizer. So if you go buy a Centipede fertilizer, you'll notice it has no phosphorus typically in it. It'll be like a 505 or a 10-0-10 or something like that. It'll be no phosphorus and really low in other things too. There's hardly any fertilizer that gets added to Centipede, and it's one of the nice things about using Centipede overall is it takes less of some of those nutrients that it gets added to turf a lot of times that end up being washed out and ends up in runoff and ends up in creeks and streams and other things. That's why they have blackout periods on fertilizing in Florida, because times a year when that fertilizer might wash into the streams and creeks and cause algae blooms and other problems that some of these nutrients can cause in our waterways. So that's one of the beauties of using Centipede as turf, is it doesn't take as much fertilizer, if any fertilizer. I rented a house for a year and a half when I was much younger, 18, 19. That had a Centipede lawn. It never had been fertilized, and the turf looked great. Let's see. Are we planting native trees over here in the native garden? Yes, and we already own one, river birch, a dwarf river birch that's going in. I don't think, maybe that video will have gone up yesterday as you're watching this. I don't remember it right now. I have so many things that I'm shooting or thinking about shooting. A dwarf river birch that's going in over there for sure. And we're going to probably end up with some small native tree, possibly a yellow wood on the back over here, and maybe one other small ornamental tree. And then everything else will be smaller, some large shrubs though, almost tree-like shrubs. And then the same person asked, what is my thoughts on the Milwaukee method of forest creation? So this is, that's kind of my technique, I think, overall, if you read what Milwaukee is, which is using lots of species planted close together to create kind of an understory and a middle story and a high story, basically recreating the forest floor, and then recreating how the forest grows with kind of low, medium, and taller things, intermediate tree, ornamental or intermediate sized trees, and then large trees in a forest space. So that's kind of my technique out here. I think it would lean more toward 100% native plants, in its philosophy. And I don't do that necessarily, but I do like a layered garden planted close together with lots of species, and keeping the ground covered in organic material is a really good way to create a healthy ecosystem. And so that is the philosophy behind this garden. So that is my thoughts on it. I have a similar thoughts. Let's see. This person has Abelia in zone 8A, Georgia. They look great, but they drop a lot of leaves in late summer, especially in the center. They're in full sun. They've used holly tone, the a la Jim Putnam method of throwing it in. Are they underwatering them? Likely the roots are getting hot on those Abelia in the summertime, and their defense mechanism is to shed the interior leaves. So you can prune them, fertilize them, and then, again, quite possibly crowding them a little bit more sometimes is helpful to prevent something from taking that kind of heat stress during the summertime. And, I'll see that on some Abelia. And, Abelia, almost every tag you ever see, they're going to say full sun. There's a Miss Lemon Abelia right here, this yellow one, maybe the cameras can see. Abelia, almost always the tag's going to say full sun, but some of the healthiest ones I see are in some shade around the city. Really, they're really dry shade tolerant, growing under established trees and that kind of thing. But they'll take full sun. But again, my Miss Lemon is got other things planted all around it. There's bulbs that come up around it. There's a Lauropetalum next to it. There's a Tokyo Tower Kyananthus that shades the roots a bit on the back side of it. So it's getting enough sun to stay colorful, but not so much that it's thinning during the summertime from heat stress. Remember, a lot of these plants have super shallow root systems, so when we space them apart, the sun can really work on those shallow roots. And again, going back to that Miyawaki method, that's probably the better way to say it, Miyawaki method, crowding plants together, is how they naturally grow. In a grassy plain or a wooded space. That's just how plants grow. They grow crowded together in various layers. Let's see. Okay. Somebody's in zone 6B in Ohio. Is it a bad time to plant Alyssium Scorpio, which is listed for zone 6? Okay. It's still cold, but this is when they can plant it for their parents. So if you had to plant it, you know, I'm typically not gonna plant leafy evergreens. Probably standing right here beside me. If you have to plant leafy evergreens this time of year, before we've definitely gotten past the worst of the winter, because we could I think we have a 19 on the forecast for this coming week, which I know is not cold for the rest of the country, but for us in mid to late February, 19 is actually pretty cold. And so planting leafy evergreen plants that are barely hardy here could be problematic for that 19-degree night, especially, I don't know where the plant came from. If the plant came from somewhere that was warmer, or it hasn't been acclimated, or you've been overprotecting it in a garage or something like that, right? It could get damaged. But if you had to plant it, you can plant it and then have them protect it for the next few weeks. So put some sort of pot upside down over top of it on nights that it's below freezing, or put some sort of sheet on top of it nights below freezing for the rest of the winter. So if I had to plant it, I would offer it some protection, since it's a barely hardy leafy evergreen, and we've got up there in 6B Ohio at least, you know, 4 to 6 more weeks of potentially really cold, and then maybe some sporadic cold even beyond that. Okay, let's see. So, somebody asked the source for the HortTube name. I was searching all kinds of things in my brain and came up with that one, and I don't think it's a very good name, but I use it. But it just means horticulture television is what I had in my mind. It seemed brilliant at the moment, but it is kind of a weird name. I probably should have come up with something else, or just called the channel Gardening with Jim Putnam or something like that. That's the obvious answer looking back on it, but I used it, and here we are. Let's see, number 9, they're confused about Poet's Laurel, and I haven't covered, I think Poet's Laurel's been on the channel maybe once or twice in all these videos, and we'll do a single plant video on it at some point and have it more represented like it should be amongst the leafy evergreens. You know, if I go through this neighborhood and, you know, see some of the nicer gardens, you know, in the park shade areas, Poet's Laurel is almost always represented in those spaces. They're confused because some sources say moist, some say dry. They have a small slope in the shade, in high shade, dappled light, and it can get a little bit dry. But their Sarcococa and their Woodland Ruby Alyssium are doing okay. So probably the Poet's Laurel will work okay as well, but you need to keep an eye on it for a little while. So my Alyssium, which we have, I just got another one. We actually have another Alyssium going into the native garden over there, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Alyssium for sure in this garden already, set, and then about to be a 7th over there. Every single one of them struggled with being dry initially and wilted in the afternoon. Every single one of them in this garden. So it takes them a minute to get rooted in. And now I don't think I'd even think about watering any of them unless it was really dry for a long period of time. So they become pretty drought tolerant. And I just started talking about a full-on Alyssium, but it's the same thing with Sarcococa, same thing with the Alyssium, same thing with the Poet's Laurel. A lot of these woodland plants, despite the fact that they probably like a more evenly moist space, can adapt to becoming drought tolerant in those spaces. It just takes them a minute. That's why I went down I don't have a Poet's Laurel to talk about, but I went down the Alyssium route of, they all initially needed some extra water, and you'll have to do that with your Poet's Laurel as well, but it can become drought tolerant in time. Just, it may take a little while longer than some other things. Okay. This person has a 30-year-old, 6 to 7 foot tall Pieris that's woody halfway up. It still blooms, but it's like a tree-formed Pieris, basically. How much can they prune it back? And can they take out some of the main branches? It is sentimental, and they don't want to kill it. So I hate it. I do not like answering questions like this about sentimental plants. For me, I would prune the thing hard, and I wouldn't even shy away from pruning the thing hard. You could initially, if you were concerned about it, take a branch or two down, you know, halfway, and make sure that those are going to flush back out, and then take more after that. just to ensure, to yourself that it's going to, to come out of it okay. So that may be a technique I would use. If the plant's sentimental to you, just take 1 or 2 of those tree forms pieces down about halfway and see if it starts to come back out in the spring, which it should pretty quickly. Ours is about to bloom now, so I'm guessing wherever you are, yours may be about to bloom, so you can do it after it flowers or before it flowers if you don't care about the flowers. Or if you're only cutting 1 or 2 pieces down, you could go ahead and do it now. But why don't you do that? It's sentimental, means a lot to you. Don't take the whole thing down all at once. But I think ultimately you could cut it halfway down and it would just flush back out of that. And then somebody asked, do I ever hard prune things to see how they'll respond? I've hard pruned virtually every shrub, non-tree that there is. At some point or another, I grew a crop of almost everything that outgrew the container that it was in at the nursery, and we would hard reset prune them in some way. So I've tried with lots and lots and lots of plants. And most things, if they're become pretty woody, are pretty good at coming out of it. Don't do this with trees. Don't cut your oak tree in half. Although I've cut Cornus Florida, or native dogwood. I had one that was a 6 to 8 inch caliper, and the top of it got broken out during Hurricane Fran, and I took a chainsaw and cut it off to 3 or 4 feet tall, and it was the prettiest dogwood I've ever owned when I moved out of that house 5 years ago, or whatever it's been. So even some trees can be responsive to really, really, really hard pruning. But there's virtually nothing that I won't initially try to hard reset. I'm not talking about Japanese maples and pine trees and trees. I'm talking about shrubs that get overgrown and stretched and that kind of thing. It's better to give them a second chance, before you pull them out and cut them in half and see what happens. Let's see. This person has mature rhododendrons. They have to be moved for a home project. They're 20 years old, 7 to 8 feet tall. Can they be transplanted? They would be using a professional. Yes. Rhododendrons have pretty shallow root systems on them, and a lot of ericaceous plants are like that, azaleas and blueberries and lots of plants like that. But they have pretty shallow, fibrous root systems on them, so you want to get a wide root ball. They don't necessarily need a very deep root ball, but they need a very wide root ball. So tell them to go wider if they can, and you can prune them hard. We had a neighbor take 10 to 12 foot tall evergreen rhododendrons, and cut them to 3 or 4 feet tall a few years ago, and I thought for sure they had killed them. And they're beautiful now, and they're going to be coming into full flower now, but it's taken probably 3 years since that moment where they hacked them back, but now they're full 6x6 plants that are buds all over them. So they'll be just in absolute full bloom, but it took 3 years to recover from that. So wide, shallow root ball, and I'd go ahead and cut them at the same time. Let's see. Somebody has a thin dwarf yopon holly on the north side of their house. It's 20 plus years old. Can it be pruned? Can they prune without damage? Yeah, you can prune it hard. Well, I don't know. I got so many pruning questions here on this week, which is the time of year that we be hard pruning some of these things that we're not using for flowers. Somebody has a 3-year-old purple daydream loropetalum that's still 1 foot tall and 2 feet wide with no blooms. The tag says 3 to 4 feet. They planted it with hostas around it. When is it okay to give up? So my purple daydream loropetalum is between 3 and 4 feet in height right here, and it'll bloom here in a few weeks. I had a couple questions on this. One is, if you planted it with hosta, was it too shady of a space? Because this loropetalum definitely needs the sun. So maybe it's a sun-loving hosta, or a hosta that will take more sun, but this thing definitely needs sun. But this is the opposite reaction most plants will have to be planted in the shade. Most of the time it would have actually grown taller and thinner in the shade and then be green instead of purple, like this one is. So I'm wondering, okay, and I take this kind of question sometimes just to say, it's not about giving up. If you've got something you put in the ground, don't have crazy expectations the first year. Sometimes something will sit there for a year before it does anything. Sometimes something can sit there 2 years before it does anything. But if you go into like a third year and it hasn't really grown, or it's potentially looks smaller than when you got it, or it's thinned out, I got to assume that it got planted too deep by me, or the landscaper that put it in, or maybe a nurseryman when they took it from one pot size into another one, maybe they planted it too deep, or I've got it in the wrong location, or it's got some significant root competition, or it's too wet, or it's too, something's going on with it. I take the opportunity to replant it, plant it somewhere else in the garden, or replant it back in that same spot a little higher if it seems wet or whatever. But at some point, it's not necessarily I give up on the plant, but I give up on, I realize I did something wrong planting it, or it doesn't like that spot that it's in, and just move it, and see what happens when you move it to another spot. Let's see. Best way to prune a Vitex. We are going to have the Vitex straightening video here at some point, and I need to really get on that. In terms of how to prune your Vitex, they bloom on new wood, so you can just do a little bit of tip pruning up at the top and then get crossing branches out. You'd want to get crossing branches out this time of year, but I wouldn't crepe murder it, bring it down way low. But you can go up there and tip prune it a little bit, get out crossing branches, but it also, the answer depends on the Vitex, because there's some branching, kind of sprawling Vitex that are almost shrub-like, and then some that are very, very upright and tree-like. So it would kind of depend on that a little bit. But if it's one that you're using as a tree, you just get crossing branches out of it this time of year, and you can tip prune. And if there's a branch that's going out further than another one, you can cut that back a bit. Clean up any suckers, because they do sucker sometimes as well. But pretty straightforward on just thin the canopy out a bit. Is hardwood mulch okay to put around annual flowers? Not really. So I always say that the hardwood, the putting wood in the garden, stealing nitrogen thing is a bit overblown. So, in order for this wood that's in this path to break down, it requires a little bit of nitrogen. It's got to take that nitrogen from the soil, and then it re-releases it later. It's kind of minor overall, and it really doesn't have that much of an impact on woody plants, shrubs and trees and that kind of thing. But it can have some negative impact on some of your perennials. In fact, it can have some negative impact on your perennials just coming up through it. Some perennials have a harder time pushing up through that kind of thing. Heavy amounts of wood material. And then, but it does take enough nitrogen away from annuals that it tends to stunt them a little bit during the growing season. And we're trying to get all we can out of our annual flowers. So putting something around them that could potentially stunt them even slightly is enough to be a deterrent for me. So I'm going to use more compost or pine bark, if pine bark's available in your area, cow manure, those kinds of things to grow my annuals in. Okie dokie. Let's see. When have we tilled in our landscape? Okay, when have we tilled in our landscape? When would you till? So I only till, and I've said this before. What's Holly doing? Holly. I've said before, tilling is killing, meaning that if you take a healthy soil and you run a tiller through it on a sunny day or a windy day, just turning that soil over is going to kill the beneficial things that you're growing in that soil. Bigger life like worms or earthworms and things you can't see like bacteria and other things. So, tilling is killing. But if you're moving into a new house or it's a new landscape space and there hasn't really been any organic material in that space, or it's under lawn right now, you're not killing anything because there's nothing in that soil to kill. And so getting in there and maybe getting some air down in that soil is a good idea. If especially in a new construction situation where they've run equipment all over it, pushing soil here and there, and it's just a disaster, mess, what they do. And they buried bricks and all kinds of stuff out there that you may find as well. But the only time I've tilled since I've been here was the vegetable garden over there initially, and a few of these annual beds. Oh, and I actually tilled for the turf that was where this patio I'm standing on was initially. Again, just trying to get some air down in that soil, and then I just put compost over the top of it. Since I've done that, it's no-till farming. I I might get in there and take a shovel and pull back on it, or some sort of pick or whatever. You could just pull back and aerate the soil slightly if you wanted to, but I don't till it anymore after that. But there's a lot of you doing new projects, new things, new spaces. Absolutely, get in there and till it. Get it broken up and relieve some of that compaction, and then get it covered in wood chips or compost or whatever, whatever type of gardening you're going to do with it. But initially, tilling is killing only if you have something to kill, right? Okay, let's see. This person has, they've put down, they're in heavy silty white clay in the high desert. They've put down 6 inches of wood chips with coffee grounds, rake the coffee grounds in. Can they put compost plant debris on top? They're adding more wood chips later this summer. You can probably get away with it in the high desert where you're not going to have a lot of, where you're not going to have a lot of rain. So the really deep mulch methods work well in those areas where you're not going to have a tremendous amount of rain. We have to be careful with the depth of the organic material we put on the ground in the east, or any area where you're going to get a lot of rain, because we could go from aerobic conditions where we're trying to get beneficial bacteria and fungi working, to anaerobic conditions where they're basically drowning in water and material, and the soil becomes kind of funky. But again, I think if you're in an area that stays dry for a good portion of the year, that deep mulch method works extremely well. So if you want to continue to put organic material on top of it, but typically that's the wrong stacking. You'd really rather have the compost down at the bottom and then the larger material up at the top. So if you do put some compost over the top of it, I do really thin. I mean, just whatever compost you're trying to get rid of, just super, super thin. But again, I think drier areas, the deep compost, deep organic material is fine. Here it's not as good, and it can actually fight against you here where we get a lot of rainfall. So this person's neighbor's pin oak drops leaves on their property, and they have markings on them making her think they're diseased or have insects. Loves the oak, but is it okay to leave those leaves? Yeah, it's absolutely okay to leave those leaves in your garden. If the plant was truly diseased, maybe not, but the things you're seeing, a lot of things you're seeing on the leaves are especially off of oaks. Oaks are, again, keystone species. There are 500 plus species that take advantage of oaks. And what we tend to in the fall is caterpillars are up in those, attach themselves to the back of those leaves, and then they drop down in the leaf litter, and then they then they wrap themselves up and they do their thing through the winter, and then they emerge in the spring from down here in the leaf litter. And so a lot of those leaves that are dropping off have life on them. And so that's the one reason I don't want to rake them up, because what you're seeing on those leaves is in fact life, potentially. And those things, are just doing their thing out there. Some of it's going to be taken by birds over the course of the winter, and some of it's going to escape getting eaten by the birds and emerge as moths and butterflies and other things in the spring. But that fall leaf drop from oaks and birches and a lot of other trees and sugar maples and even red maples and others, when they're dropping those leaves in the fall, they're dropping life down on the ground, and that life kind of wiggles its way into the ground a lot of times and gets a little deeper. It's one of the issues with having lawn around those trees, is those things can't actually get down in the ground or wiggle their way down in there when the leaves drop off. It's a whole other topic that I've never really talked about, but leave the leaves if you can. There is life on them. We are up to number 21. Let's see. This person has wood chips from a few large oaks. Are they okay to put around established shrubs and trees? I kind of said that earlier. Woody plants, you're okay putting these wood chips around, but I wouldn't put 6 inches of wood chips around anything. I only put 6 inches of wood chips if I'm creating something new or the paths or something like that. But a small amount, 3 inches of wood chips can absolutely be good mulch for your established trees and shrubs. Let's see. How are our Daphnes doing? We're down to one Daphne. we have definitely Daphne abusers, and there's Daphne in the video from Friday that Jason had pulled onto the carts to take to the pine knot hellebore sale for the weekend. So I showed Daphne in a video on Friday. We have one Daphne out in the front garden. It's blooming beautifully. The two that we had in the containers and the other one that we had in the ground have succumbed to various overwatering, I'm sure, than I did out here in the garden. So I've gone over to the Raulston a few days ago and enjoyed their all of their Daphnes in bloom. But yes, I am a definite, I've killed more Daphne than anybody watching this video right now, I think, because I rooted thousands of Daphne, not thousands, hundreds, because it was hard to get enough rooted cut. I'd love to have rooted thousands, but I only probably had enough to do hundreds every year. And of those, I would get dozens of finished plants from hundreds of rooted cuttings. And they're just, wish that plant was easier to grow, especially in our clay soil here. Let's see. This person has 5 Rose Creek Abelias, but one that is in more shade seems to create seedlings. Would the seedlings be true Rose Creek Abelia? And does the planting conditions contribute to the seeding? I don't know if it being in more shade caused it to seed. And I don't know if the seedlings will be true to seed. They could have crossed. If it crossed with itself, then maybe they're going to be. They won't be 100% true, but they could be similar, very similar to that Rose Creek Abelia. But it could have crossed with a different Abelia, at which point it would have, maybe some would have similarities and some wouldn't. They may be the intermediate between the two different things that cross together. So every Rose Creek Abelia is a cutting off a Rose Creek Abelia. So they're all clones of one another. The Rose Creek Abelia that you buy at the store, I have no idea where Holly is right this minute. The Rose Creek Abelia you buy at the store is a clone of the original Rose Creek Abelia. Holly, good girl. She discovered Steph working over here on the side of the driveway and was visiting. You're okay. You're okay. It ain't no problem. You're not in trouble. You're not in trouble. I just didn't know. You're usually in eyesight. You're usually in. We have a line of sight rule. We always have. And the only time she's ever gotten in trouble was at the nursery with me when she was younger, and if I couldn't see her. And she's learned that over the years. If she has to be able to turn back and see me, and I have to be able to turn around and see her, and we have no problems. And that time she had gone around the corner, but that's because Steph was out there. So no trouble for Holly. No trouble for Holly anyway. She's 16. If she wanders off because she can't hear, can't see, then what? It's not a problem. Let's see. She has no problems. Okay, let's see. Number 24. Somebody's Raulston Hardy viburnum had a tough winter in zone 8A. Can they trim off the brown? Yes, but I'd wait. Another week or two till we're definitely past the worst of the winter to uncover these plants from their damaged leaves. Let's see. And last one for this week. Somebody's in a new development above their home. People are looking down on them. They have some 80 to 100 foot sweet gums, and in the winter you can just see directly through them. They want to put in some understory evergreen plants, and it's a dry creek, so it's probably seasonally wet, but they can mound them up. So they just need shade-loving evergreens for privacy. You can use wax myrtles for that. Even Shindo viburnum, even though we would probably say full sun on the tag, can be used for that. We're going to have a Persea going in over here in this garden. That's an evergreen native that you can use. If you can mound them up, there's American hollies that you can use, and it pretty much at that point, if you can get them up above the grade and let them select putting their roots down into the water, almost any leafy evergreen for shade will work. Definitely any Elysium, Elysium parviflorum, Elysia floridanum, any of those will work. So basically any shade leafy evergreen shrub you want to use, as long as you can. Most of the time, even plants that like wet feet, like a river birch or something, typically will come up in an area where it can keep its feet dry, and then it will select to putting its roots down in the water on its own. So, Again, mound them up and most things will be fine. So again, the t-shirts are 10% off over on the website, and lots of content coming up this week related around that native garden, and moving a few things from here over there, transplanting a camellia that's back here that's needed to be transplanted for a little while, and several other things. So thank you guys so much for following along. You can ask questions down in the comment section, and that's where I pick from each week. Thanks for watching.